back to our marriage moments with Shane and Becky.
Welcome back.
So we've been talking throughout our weeks and our time together about different things that are important to marriage, and tonight we are going to be talking about 3 marriage builders that will strengthen every fully connected marriage.
Right, and we're following the Fully Connected Marriage devotional that's on your Bible app, and so if you want to follow along, all of the notes are there, the devotional is there, scripture verses there, so if you want to pull that up, then you can follow along. So anyways, we're talking about 3 marriage builders that will strengthen every fully connected marriage. Marriage builder number 1.
And number 1 is intimacy.
Yeah, intimacy is one of those things that sometimes we think of the word intimacy and automatically we think of, sex. And it's not just that, it's part of that. But like intimacy kind of is not just physical.
Right. And the physical part is obviously very important. And you have to acknowledge that and take care of that. But we also have a lot of other things that lead up to that act of sex.
Absolutely, because sometimes I think that we can do this a lot in our everyday lives, is that we try and disconnect physicality with our emotions and even the circumstances that surround our life. Mm-hmm. And that we think to ourselves, well, what does that have to do with this? And you're like, well, it has a lot to do with this, right? Because you have to be emotionally connected in order to honestly want to be physically connected, right?
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
And so the intimacy comes in where you're kind of like, okay, let's, starts with a conversation. It starts with are we actually connected emotionally? And a lot of times when there's a disconnect emotionally, there can be a disconnect physically.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really hard to always stay connected emotionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we only ever talk about our schedule, which adult is taking which child to which location,
Mm-hmm.
If we never go beyond those kind of conversations, then being intimate with one another can be very difficult because there's just no emotional connection.
Right, so it's not questions like she was saying, it's more like, so how are you feeling today? Or is there something that's stressing you out? Or how can I pray for you? Or is there, it's kind of those type of personal questions where it's just like, this isn't about run of the mill. This isn't about getting all this stuff done. This is actually showing that you care about the other person.
Right, and we need to connect often. Oftentimes we can just connect when we want something, when we want that act in the bedroom. And so It's important that we connect regularly, daily. Really, we should be connecting with one another. That shouldn't be that big of a stretch. And so we need to try and connect beyond just the schedule, but to connect emotionally.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be like, hey, honey, how are you feeling today? Right? It shouldn't be that. It's not some sort of okay, here's what I have to do in order to have sex. It's more like, no, caring about the person, and it's that overall feeling of caring that creates the atmosphere of intimacy.
Right.
And
communication is obviously not just talking, but it's also listening. God gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth. And so we need to make sure we are listening more than we're talking. Right. So if we are able
Which can be hard for some of us.
You can just say.
Just say it.
Me?
No, I was pointing at me. Oh my goodness. Come on now.
So we need to listen and talk. And so talk less, and then listen more.
Right. And listening is an active thing where it's like you're making eye contact, your body language is there. Obviously, you probably shouldn't be looking at your phone at the same time.
Yeah, that's often a really big turnoff.
Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that we do that and we listen well. And we kind of keep it physical, where it's just like, okay, if the only kind of time we're, being physical is when we're having sex, then sometimes that can get awkward. And you're kind of like, sometimes it's nice just to hold hands or kiss hello or kiss goodbye. And some of those kinds of things that make it a part of every day and not just like, okay, this is when we touch each other type of thing.
Right.
So the first one is intimacy. The second one is intentionality.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about this before, although this is a little bit different in how what they talk about is, we need to be intentional in our relationships. We actually have to put in some work if we want our marriage to actually be connected. It's not just going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen by chance. You actually have to put the effort in. And one way to be intentional is to actually know what your spouse wants and likes.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, I know that Becky, for instance, hates making her own breakfast.
I do.
And so part of me being intentional in building our connectedness is realizing that I want to make her breakfast because I know she hates that. Now, that's not everybody, but I know that about her, and that I also know that she hates putting gas in the car.
I really do.
And so
it is his job.
That's my job. And if I don't do that,
I do tell him.
it does mean that I have failed. And so what I want to make sure is I know those things. So why not use those things to my advantage to show my wife that I love her?
That's true, because that he knows that that's important to me. And when I actually notice when I get into the vehicle and the gas can or the gas gauge is full, I actually will text him and say, thank you for putting gas in it, because it does mean that he knows that that's something that I would like. And so not only do we have to know what our spouse wants, but we also have to go the extra mile. Mm-hmm. And I really like how they said this in there, is that this is more about serving your spouse, and you're not serving to get, because we all know people who serve just to get something out of you, and you know that you don't like it. And so why would your spouse like that? So you're not serving your spouse so that they have to serve you or so that they have to give you something. You are serving because you are loving them.
It's funny, this expression, going the extra mile, because in a biblical context, a Roman guard could ask a Jew at any point to carry his pack for a mile, and say, because that's what was part of being under Roman rule. A Roman guard could just say to any Jew, "You need to carry my pack for a mile." And so this expression, "go the extra mile," talks about how a Jew, after carrying their pack for a mile, would be willing to say, "I will carry it another mile."
Right.
Not
being asked.
Not because I have to, but because I want to show you that I care about you. And that's what it's talking about. It's like, yes, we are all exhausted at times, and like it feels like we don't have the extra in there. And so often you're just like, okay, well, I've got extra energy. What do I do? Well, I'll put it into my wife. It's not usually how it works. It's more like I'm exhausted, but I care about my husband, I care about my wife, and so I want to show them that I do. And it's not about, okay, well, I'm going to do this because they better give it back, like I better get something in return. It's more like, man, I just want to show them I care about them and I'm thinking of them, and it is a little bit extra energy, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and when we show that we care about our spouse by going that extra mile, usually we will get that in return. But even if we don't, it's not our job to care about the results. Our job is to love. And one way of that love, that love that casts out all fear, and the love that 1 Corinthians talks about, it is the love that goes the extra mile.
Right. And the Bible talks about how God loved us first, right?
Yeah.
And he showed that and that kind of goes into our next point, but the point about this one is that he was the one who was serving us, that he said, okay, I'm going to do this, because that's who I am. That Bible says God is love, and that's just who he is. And that needs to kind of filter into who we are, especially in our marriages, where it's just like, okay, I'm doing this because this is good. It's a good thing to do, not because I'm trying to get something back.
Yeah, it's an act of will, right? It's a decision, a choice.
And it's a part of our being.
Yeah.
It's not transactional. It's really, really dangerous to become transactional in any of our relationships, that we would invest into a relationship with the idea that we're going to get something back, any kind of
it's not a biblical way to have
no
a
it's like talking to people about Jesus, talking to giving to our churches and serving in any way, shape, or form. Man, as soon as it becomes like this transaction, hoping that we're gonna get something in return, it just becomes this.
It's not a good place to be.
It's not.
You need to work hard against that in your marriage, for sure. That is never how you want your marriage to go.
And I really think that there is an opportunity for us to have joy in the process of serving.
Yes.
And I think that we have to make sure that we can find that joy and just decide, I'm going to have a good time doing this no matter what.
Yeah. And it's not about, like you say, you can find that joy. It's not about, man, I have to fold his laundry again. Like, it shouldn't be like that. That's not going the extra mile if our hearts are complaining about it. That's just doing your duty or doing your part of the job. But when we go the extra mile, we should have joy.
Mm-hmm. So I think we can do that. It's just about choosing to have the right attitude at the right time. Last one.
Number 3.
The last one, the marriage builder, is initiation. And this initiation is kind of like what we just kind of talked about, how we know that God loved us and he loved us first, that he took the first step towards loving us. Mm-hmm. That Christ took that first step. He's the one who's like, okay, I'm going to love them. And the Bible says that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, right? Mm-hmm. And so he initiated love towards us and in hopes that we would reciprocate. But not, it wasn't dependent upon that. It wasn't like, okay, well, I'm going to do this and we'll see what, they better do it back. It's more like, no, that's just who he is. But he was like the initiator. Yeah. And in our relationship, we've got to, each of us, take the responsibility of initiating, not waiting for the other person to be like, well, maybe if they talk to me, I'll talk to them. Well, maybe if they give me a chocolate bar, I'll give them a, you know what I mean? It's like you could be waiting all the time and realizing, okay, that can't be our response to our relationship.
No, because we would always be waiting for each other, right?
Right.
And that's not love. Christ clearly shows that he did not wait for us to accept him. He came to earth first, and then we received him. And so taking the initiative, just being willing to say, okay, I'm choosing to do this. Even if I don't feel like it, I will choose to show love to my spouse today, even if he doesn't deserve it, even if she doesn't deserve it. It's not really about that. It's about your choice to love.
And 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 11 says, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. So, it's trying to tell us that that's what we should be doing. It's not like, let's wait to see what happens. Let's reward, okay, we're going to do this, we'll respond. Mm-hmm. No, it's us. No, this is what we do. We initiate. Mm-hmm. And as Christians, we have to be the initiators. We have to be the ones who love first.
Yep.
And we all have to take on that kind of responsibility to love first. And there's little things that we can do, even in our relationship, to kind of like initiate, right? Like sometimes it is that little kind of flirt or little note that you can send, or a little wink or smile, or hey, just it's something, right? It's just like that you show, and that you're like, I'm gonna do this. Mm-hmm. And it's not a response. It's like, no, I'm going to be the one who does it, right? It's not just that. There's other ways to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Another way would be to how you publicly talk about your spouse.
Huge deal.
If you are always negative about your spouse, if only ever put things on Facebook or social media that what your spouse is doing wrong or how they failed you once again, that is really not going to build your relationship and help your relationship to get stronger. We need to publicly protect our spouses, and how we respond to them is key.
Yeah, and it's publicly, but it's also like to our friends, to our families, to your, don't be talking to your parents bad about your spouse or your kids, to your kids, really how we honor one another. It should be the opposite. It should be like, no, my wife, my husband, they're trying their best. They're doing the very best that they can, and they're awesome. They're rock stars. That kind of stuff, man. When your spouse hears you say that, that's it's gold.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, when Becky says that about me, it feels like awesome, and hopefully she feels that, and she feels that. I'm sure she feels that in return, because how can you not?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And that's part of taking initiative, right? Yeah. And just being like, okay, I don't have to. Of course, we married each other. There must be some sort of okay, we approve of each other. Duh, we're married. But to make the initiation and say, no, I want to actually say this out loud, and I want them to know that this is, really what I think.
Right.
And that shows that initiation of saying, okay, I'm building this.
Yeah. So we need to be intimate with one another, both physically and even emotionally. We need to take the initiative. We need to
and be intentional.
Be intentional,
right? Know each other, know the way that each other are, and so.
So the challenge for the week is to do just that, to be intentional, and to decide to be intimate with one another in a not just physical manner, but to actually figure out what they're thinking, what your spouse is thinking, and then why not publicly say something positive about your spouse this week?
Yeah.
And let's see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's our marriage moment, and so we've got one more week to go. So we will see you